On today's show, we are live from the 2025 WNBA Draft. We were in the rooms where it happened, and we'll be sharing with you what we made of this historic evening. The Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast. It starts right now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. You are Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Jackie Powell. I am one of your hosts on this program. I cover the New York Liberty here at the Next, and I've covered women's basketball and its culture nationally at many other places. Check out all of the excellent women's basketball reporting and writing we are doing at thenexthoops.com, and please consider subscribing to make sure that the journalists that work so hard to cover this sport are paid for their valuable work. And that includes Emily Adler, who is here with me. And thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. So I have Emily here. We were both in the rooms where it happened. So in segment one, Emily is going to explain who she believes were the winners and losers of tonight's 2025 WNBA Draft. Then Emily will go home, and I will then be with you for the final two segments where I'll take you behind the scenes, what I saw on the ground floor, where, I saw some very interesting, very important people, including Ellie, of course. And then in segment three, I'll break down what I learned from Cathy Engelbert's presser, which happened pre-draft. Some really interesting things that went on there. But anyway, okay, Emily. First, let's start off with the winners. Who won this draft tonight?
In my opinion, the Golden State Valkyries. You start with a player that a lot of the people in the audience had no idea who she was. Juste Osipe, the Lithuanian wing. And then you also had Cheyenne Sellers in the second round. Sellers fell a lot. My best guess, really my only guess, is because of the medicals on her right knee. She injured it no fewer than 4 separate times this year, in addition to a couple of left knee injuries last year. If healthy, I imagine she would have gone top 6. So you have, I think, 2 really good wings, pretty solid upside from both of them, adding to a team that, at this point, they're not going to make a big enough difference to prevent Golden State from being right near the top of the lottery next year, which is to say that the roster is not going to have a lot of wins this year. But it's going to be fun, and I think the on-court experience, if both those players if Josite comes over, and if either or both of those players make the roster, I think it'll be super fun. I think another team that really did well for themselves was Los Angeles. Los Angeles,
I agree.
If we're assuming that Cheyenne Sellers' knee maybe didn't look good on an MRI machine, then Sarah Ashley Barker is a really solid pick of a wing in the first round. Does a lot of stuff pretty solidly. And you follow that up with getting they really need center depth. And you follow that up with getting a center who really should not have been there in the late second round in Sanaya Fagan. Again, a player does a lot of stuff really well, nothing at a super high level, but players that, are decent bets to stick in the W and just do a lot of stuff off the bench pretty solidly. And you add them to a core that, with Kelsey Plum, Cameron Brink, you have young-ish players who are going to be around for at least a couple more years, who you could expect to get really good production out of them.
That's a really good point about the Sparks. I couldn't agree more, especially with Sanaya Fagan, because it seems as though Cameron Brink won't be ready to start the 2025 WNBA season. And the Sparks really needed a big who could guard in space. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think that they really had that on the roster besides Brink. So to me, that really... that was a good pickup. I mean, I know they have Mercedes Russell, but she can't really guard in space.
Yeah, I mean, you have a pretty busy center room right there. It depends on how you want to see these lineups, right? So Diarca Hamby is a really good offensive 5, but a really dreadful defensive 5. So how do you want to play that? It works with Cameron Brink depending on how you want to set that up. But then you're playing with the woman formerly known as Maria Vadiva. I'm not going to try to pronounce her last name on the fly because I haven't looked at it in about 4 months. But you're also looking at, again, in that center, Mercedes Russell, and depending on how you want to define, Azurá Stevens. So that's really one true center, or two true centers in Maria and Mercedes Russell. So now you get to add Sanaya Fagan, who can play the true five, basically your third center, and someone who, can also play alongside and really provide a sort of versatile enough center to let someone like Hamby or Stevens use the post even while they share the court.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I guess, so let's talk about losers. Who really do you feel like could have done better in this draft?
So, I love Aji Sivka. Of everyone, so our draft scouting team is myself, the internet famous Hunter Cruz, and the internet anonymous Lincoln Schaefer. And of the three of us, I was by far the highest on Aji Sivka, so I love Chicago picking her. Beyond her, look, Haley Van Lith is a fine player to draft. As far as true point guards, when it came to legitimate prospects in this draft, players who were left at the end of the first round, you had her, legitimate lead guards, maybe not point guards. You had her and Tina Powell. I think going with her when you could have gone with Tina Powell on a team that really, really needs shooting, we know why they went with Haley Van Lith. And I think it's not that it won't work, but I think you had a lot higher potential and a better roster fit, even if maybe less of a friendly fit. And then beyond that, they really did not draft any players that are probably going to stick. Madison Scott is an interesting wing. She's been a good offensive player 1 year in college and nothing really changed. Aisha Coulibaly in the third round, she was inefficient at Texas A&M, is coming off an ACL tear. When it felt like really doubling down on sort of the roster construction that didn't work, especially well last year, outside of, again, Aisha Sivka.
To be clear, wasn't Madison Scott taken by Dallas? Or
right, I'm confusing teams that made bad picks outside their first player.
So
Maddie Westbeld, yes. They actually did draft a player. They drafted two players coming off ACL tears. Or not ACL tears. Significant injuries. Aisha Coulibaly and Maddie Westbeld. They didn't do this. Neither of them were particularly good this year either. And I really liked Maddie Westbeld before. She's not a WNBA athlete.
That was always the concern with her. And that is something that the scouting team has consistently communicated throughout her years. Now, so the immediate winners and losers, I think we have to sort of talk about the Dallas Wings.
Oh, did they do anything interesting tonight? Sorry, Howard's not here. I have to fill in.
So, for those of you living under a rock, the Dallas Wings picked Paige Bueckers with their number 1 overall pick. So,
I've heard that name before.
So does that alone make the Dallas Wings winners?
It makes their draft class good. Does it make it optimal? I wouldn't necessarily say so. I mean, I very much like Isaiah James as a player, interesting prospect as a scoring guard. Do they need that on this roster? You already have a lot of playmaking guards with Enrique, who is just sort of a variant of Isaiah James. Juicy Carrington is a nice scorer. Juicy Carrington, she's a defensive wing. Her offensive profile is non-passing, scoring downhill. Are you going to play these players together? Probably not. Again, I like her, but on this roster, not the best option. And then outside of that, Madison Scott is an interesting defender with size, and she was a good mid-range shooter this year. Never else in her college career, so how much do you want to bet on that? Especially when, again, they could have used Cheyenne Sellers. They really could have used Sanaya Fagan, just given how this roster is constructed. It's a little odd, frankly.
I was so shocked that Dallas didn't take Sanaya Fagan. I mean, they haven't had a center who could guard in space in years.
They haven't had a center who could guard in years.
Anyway, besides Dallas, I guess, what do you make of what the Connecticut Sun and the Washington Mystics were able to do? Those three teams, I mean, they had a major presence in this draft.
I'll start with the Mystics. The Mystics were interesting. So they went with far and away the best player available at number 3, and they took Sonia Citron. And then outside of Citron, with their next 2 picks, I think they basically went for the highest variance that they could in terms of player outcomes. Kiki Iriafen is an interesting player in that, if you've watched her before, you've watched her at Stanford, you've watched her at USC, and you kind of think you know how she plays, but she's truly not actually a paint defender. She is much better defending wings than bigs, and then she is basically an elbow triple threat offensively. If you can get that to work together, that's a really unique player with the athleticism to stick in ways that you don't basically have anywhere. But again, it's really easy for that not to work. And then with Georgia Amor, basically the outcomes for Amor are that she is a really unique and really tricky offensive engine, or she just can't play in the double. Which I like for a team that has a lot of young players. You don't need sort of middling options anymore. Again, I really obviously I like Yuste Osite. I mentioned Sarah Parker, maybe not that high in the draft as 4 and 6, but those are players who have sort of more sort of straight line outcomes. The gap between the upside and the downside is pretty narrow compared to who they picked, and they already have enough young players that taking some variance, especially when you need stars to win in this league, it's a bet worth taking.
So would you say they're winners, losers? Where do you grade them?
I think process-wise, it's a good approach. I think they're pretty neutral for where they were in the draft, but they clearly had a very specific strategy, which I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. I don't necessarily disagree with it. I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. But it's a lot better than just throwing darts at a board and seeing what sticks.
I mean, my only criticism of the Mystics is I just felt like they didn't best player available.
I think that is sort of true, but I think once you got past Sonia Citron, there wasn't a huge separation in terms of player skill. I think there was a pretty strong drop off from Citron to so we had Pow and Yosite as the next tier, but there was a much bigger gap between Citron and those two than those two and everyone else worth picking.
Before we go to our first break and then I let Emily go home, where do you really put what the Connecticut Sun were able to do?
They picked players who are going to be able to who are either going to be able to or have a chance to compete to make this roster. Right? I mean, it's a wide open roster in terms of players who are actually already set to make it. Brenda Mabry doesn't want to play there, but she's on the roster. Lindsay Allen, Olivia Nelson-Adada, Layla Lay Khan, JC Sheldon, Tina Charles, I guess Diamond Shields, and then and Yvonne Anderson are probably the locks. I think I named 7 people at most. So you have a lot of room for players at pretty much every position to make this roster. So they got to take shots literally on the court. That's why you draft me smart. You have to take shots. Again, if you're in this position, Connecticut is not a team that brings in free agents. So again, go for the variance. You don't really need role players as much as you need stars in the future. Go for Anise Mara and see if she can score at a WNBA level. See if Sanaya Rivers can learn how to do anything well on offense. Rhea Marshall can probably make this roster. Why not?
So did they win? Did they lose? What do you think? How do you grade them? Do you give them a B? C?
I would give it a B or a B plus probably. I mean, again, probably should have taken Tina Powell instead of one of those 2 players. But again, if you're looking strictly for upside, they have an upside that Powell doesn't. I think again, it is a positive look for the front office to have a process, even if maybe it wasn't best player available. So B, and it'll look very different in hindsight.
The only question I have is why Pow fell so far.
Sometimes GMs just overthink things, and there were a bunch of teams that we generally regard as having smart general managers that just didn't have first-round picks. So that was the case with the team that drafted her, Atlanta, where she probably should be a favorite to make the roster given their construction. That was the case with Atlanta. That was the case with Indiana, given that Steph White is basically their GM. That was the case with New York. That was the case with Minnesota. So, Minnesota bypassed her. They don't have any roster space this year, and they had a huge upside swing if they could take it. These teams that I can't necessarily say whether they, outside of Dan Padover in Atlanta, whether they would have taken her, but teams that I think we would have associated as discrete landing spots for her that just weren't available. And so you had, I think, teams that like more isolation scoring creation, teams that also kind of tend to overthink things.
I think Atlanta's a great fit for her.
Yeah.
So I think if I were to say a winner, I think Te-Hina Paopao won, because she's going to go into a situation where she's a really good chance of making a WNBA roster. Well, Emily, thank you so much. I'm going to go to our first ad break. And when we return, it will just be me, and I will be taking you all behind the scenes. I want to tell you all about our friends at Hungry. Spring is here and life is busier than ever. Between work, family, and everything in between, who has time for grocery shopping and meal prep? That's why I use Hungry Root. It makes eating healthy, delicious meals simple and stress-free. Hungry Root is like having your own personal shopper and nutritionist wrapped into one. They take care of grocery shopping and meal planning, offering personalized recommendations based on your tastes and health goals. With their high-quality, nutritious food, you can stick to your gut-friendly, high-protein diet without spending hours planning. The meals come together in 15 minutes or less, giving you more time, something valuable in our fast-paced world. Take advantage of this exclusive deal. Get 40% off your first box plus a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA. Thank you very much, Hungry Root. And I am back. It is now just me, Jackie Powell. Emily has gone home. And so what I'm going to talk to you all about is what were some of the sights and sounds and the things I was able to experience that you all might not have seen and heard while watching the draft on ESPN. So let's start with the beginning, or rather the pregame, or before the draft got started. So I was walking around on the ground floor here at the shed, which is at Hudson Yards. And who did I see but the one and only Ellie the Elephant and Lightning the Pegasus. That's the Dallas Wings mascot, schmoozing with fans. Ellie obviously had a contingent of fans following her and wanting pictures. Lightning was just very happy to be at the draft. She seemed very excited about Paige. Although I do have a recommendation for the Dallas Wings now that they have drafted Paige Bueckers. They do need to invest in a new costume for Lightning because I could see that her hands were cracked. Lightning's hands were cracked. And so I think she could use a little bit of a tune-up, just like how Ellie got a new suit. But anyway, I digress. What did I also notice? I noticed, the who's who of women's basketball sitting in the seats between different agents like Allison Gaylor and Jackie Gemellis from Disrupt the Game, Boris Lecheski from SIG. Who else did we see? We saw coaches. You saw Brenda Fries. You saw Gino Ariema. Kim Mulkey, who of course was wearing something quite sparkly. And then you saw folks like Jalen Suggs. He's a player in the NBA for the Orlando Magic, and he's the boyfriend of Haley Van Lith. And when Haley Van Lith, her name was announced at 11th overall by the Chicago Sky, he was giving her a standing ovation. He was filming her. And even after the draft, he had her Chicago Sky hat on his head. It was very sweet. What else did I see behind the scenes? So I'm sure you all remembered last year when Kate Martin was in the audience rooting on Caitlin Clark. She was there to support her good friend. And lo and behold, Kate Martin gets drafted by the Las Vegas Aces when she didn't even expect it. And she was invited up to accept her jersey. So this time that happened 3 times tonight. It was very interesting. So first you had Aaliyah Nye, who was drafted 13th overall by the Las Vegas Aces, which was quite a shock to the room. But Aaliyah Nye was in the audience cheering on her teammate from Alabama in Sarah Ashley Barker. She went, I believe it was 9th overall to the LA Sparks. And so that was the first time. And of course, the Las Vegas Aces, this is their second time in a row doing this, drafting someone who wasn't invited to the draft but was there anyway. Then you had the 2 UConn players who were just there to support Paige. And I believe almost the entire UConn Husky roster was there at the draft tonight, along with the entire coaching staff. Pre-draft, I remember some UConn fans trying to get close to where the players were sitting, and this little girl and her mom were screaming, "Ice, Ice, can you please autograph this?" And, Ice Brady and Jenna Elfie, Caitlin Chen, Aubrey Griffin, they were all sitting in the front row. And when both Caitlin Chen and Aubrey Griffin were drafted, so Caitlin Chen was drafted by the Golden State Valkyries at, I believe, in the 3rd round. And then you had the Minnesota Lynx taking Aubrey Griffin as the second to last pick in the WNBA draft. And you would not believe the joy that came from those UConn Huskies that were there supporting presumably Paige Bueckers. And then Paige Bueckers was jumping on Aubrey Griffin as she got drafted. It was a really beautiful moment just because Aubrey Griffin has been through a lot in her career as a basketball player at UConn. She's been through a boatload of injuries between a back, a torn ACL, I believe, and she had limited playing time when she returned from that injury. So we'll see. I mean, she'll go to training camp, Minnesota Lynx training camp. It is doubtful that she will make the roster, but she'll show the Lynx and maybe the league what she can do. Who knows? Maybe someone will pick her up on a hardship, or maybe the Lynx will say to her, "Hey, we're going to stash your rights and we want you to come to training camp in 2026. We'll have to see. But it was a really beautiful moment, especially in the press room when both Caitlin Chen and Aubrey Griffin were getting interviewed by media. Gino Auriemma was in the back watching his players talk to the press after being drafted. And Caitlin Chen addressed Gino in the back, and he put his arms up like this and was waving. It was a really special moment. So coming up, I'm going to chat a little bit about what we learned from Commissioner Cathy Engelbert's press conference. But first, I want to talk to you all about our friends at OpenPhone. So, if you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about it. When was the last time you had a service emergency? If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. That's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system to streamline and scale your customer communications, all through an app on your phone or computer. I love that I don't need to carry two phones. With OpenPhone, I can manage business calls and texts from one app, whether I'm at my desk or on the go. My favorite feature, the shared inbox. Your team can jump into any conversation without missing a beat. The AI call transcripts and summaries save you time on follow-ups and ensures you never lose track of a customer interaction. OpenPhone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's openphone.com/lockedonnba. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Thank you, OpenPhone. And yes, I am back. This is Jackie Powell doing a post-mortem of the 2025 WNBA Draft. So I do want to talk a little bit about what we heard from Cathy Engelbert tonight. And so there were two interesting moments that I'd like to point out. So first, her opening statement to all of us gathered here in the media room tonight, she spoke about how during the WNBA offseason, she and her team, in addition to working on WNBA expansion, of course, have been working on what she calls is a multi-dimensional platform to approach combating hate and vitriol, which was something that WNBA players, teams, staff, all endured during the 2024 season. And so Engelbert spoke about how she wants the WNBA to be as safe of a space as it can for fans, players, partners, and she assembled a task force during the offseason. And she has collaborated with folks including representatives at the league level, the team level, and external organizations and experts. Hailey Van Lith actually spoke about some of how they're starting this program up, which I found very fascinating. But I do want to read you all part of a quote from what Engelbert had to say. She said, "The platform will be four-pronged. It will include 1, monitoring of social media and other digital platforms using advanced technology to detect and monitor comments and threats. 2, strengthening our conduct standards across WNBA platforms, including in arenas. 3, there will be added security measures put in place at a league and team level, or at league and team levels. And 4, there will be continued services of dedicated mental health clinicians addressing concerns that players have in a timely manner." So why does this matter? I think this matters because, as we know, Cathy Engelbert had a bit of a kerfuffle last season when she was on CNBC and she was talking about the growth of the league, and she was asked about what needs to be done when it comes to protecting players, especially these young players that come into the league with huge profiles, including Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, now Paige Bueckers, Hailey Van Lith. And so she obviously missed the mark. She spoke about how these new young players were great for the growth of the league and great for building rivalries. And so players were really upset by what she had to say. And so this was really interesting to me because it shows media, fans, and players that there is an intentional response to this. And so Hailey Van Lith tonight was asked about this. And she said that during rookie orientation, the league showed the rookies an app that they're partnering with that will help players filter hate comments out of their social media channels. The other really interesting thing that came up tonight in a press conference before the draft with Cathy Engelbert was when Annie Costable of Front Office Sports addressed a report from Randall Williams at Bloomberg. And the scoop was that the league talks with the union on a new CBA, which we all know the old CBA will expire at the end of this WNBA season. So Bloomberg has a report saying that this is moving at quote unquote a snail's pace. And Bloomberg reported that the union sent a proposal that included much higher pay, retirement benefits, and more, and that the league has not yet responded. And so Annie asked Cathy Engelbert to respond to this, and she denied that there was a proposal sent the league's way back in December. It was a really, really interesting exchange. Then the reporter, Randall Williams from Bloomberg, followed up with Engelbert. He said, "What do you consider fair and what do you want out of the next CBA?" And so her response was, "I'm not going to negotiate in the media. I'm not going to talk about this with you all publicly." And so, but what she did say, which was interesting, was she said, "But you need to make sure that," quote, "we've had a few years of great growth, hyper growth, I would call it, but we need to continue to make sure that we can fund the things that players are asking for, that we want for them too. We all want players to make more money. That will happen. We'll do something transformational. But again, nothing to report exactly today because we're not far into the negotiations to report any specifics." Could Engelbert be confirming some of that report, saying that maybe they're not super far along? We don't know. But what we do know was that the presser was a little bit shorter today than usually pre-season State of the League pressers are with the commissioner. So a lot to think about and a lot to continue to dig into. What will be a fascinating 2025 WNBA season. Well, that is all for me. I want to thank Emily Adler, who hopped on for a great segment where she reacted to what we saw tonight from a player and pick standpoint. This is Jackie Powell signing off. Good night, everyone. The WNBA season is around the corner.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.